Welcome back to Season 2 of the Spiritable podcast. My name is Luke.
I'm Richard. I'm getting a master's in divinity. On this show, we try to bring spiritual ideas down to earth.
We're all trying to be better people and grow, so get on board. Ooh. It's PJ Apocalypse time.
Boom.
Spiritable podcast rolling deep. We're trapped here. We're quarantined in the basement of our studio for weeks, so we're going to be putting out an episode every hour for the next foreseeable future.
None of that's true.
Okay.
But yeah, so we're here in footy pajama land to represent all that social distancing.
I ain't got no feet.
Oh, shoot. Yo, check out my sick...
The crotch
feet.
is extraordinarily low on these ones, though. Sorry for all you audio listeners. Tune into the video.
Yeah. Mine also has a butt flap, which
We won't talk about.
I'm not going to be engaging in this video.
We decided to make this episode entirely about the coronavirus because really there's nothing else major going on in the world right now. So it felt sort of disingenuous to us to try to talk about good things that are happening or things that aren't related to this pandemic that's kind of taking over society as we know it.
Yeah,
in a non-melodramatic way.
Yeah, I'd say there are other
there are other things
happening.
But
Ooh,
wow.
hey there. Hey.
I don't want to go into too much of the details of what actually is going on because everyone can get the news everywhere. But basically, the basic overview is everyone in the U.S. is told to meet with less than 10 people at a time, stay in your home as much as you can, don't go out, wash your hands all the time, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Stock market is plummeting. So many jobs are on hold. People are out of jobs. People are working from home. People are laid off. Grocery stores are looking to hire more people. It's just really taken over in a lot of ways that we should have seen coming maybe, but is affecting us nonetheless.
Yeah, I wanna step back and ask a big question about this.
Okay. To me or just in general?
Just in general, but also to you. I think a big question that spirituality and religion often asks itself is, why do bad things happen? And that's like a huge overarching question where if you believe in an omnipotent God, why does he allow bad things to happen? And I think some people interpret that as, God is doing it to test us in some way for us to overcome and grow spiritually through it. Some people see it as even more extreme than that, as a punishment from God sort of idea.
Sure.
Some see it as totally unrelated to God. And so then the question is, why is God not involved? Why is God not stopping it? And so just the question of like coronavirus, did God do this?
Did God plant the coronavirus?
Yeah.
In specific or... Because I feel like maybe I've talked about it a lot, but I don't know if we talked about it on this podcast a bunch. But basically... I don't know. I take more of a cold deist type of perspective in these type of situations. Like, I don't think God planted this virus and planned it to release in a purposeful way to accomplish a certain end. I think he created a system of laws and structures that allowed this to happen, but it wasn't like God is the Dwight Schrute meme and was like, we need a new plague. Yeah. I don't think it was that purposeful, but I don't think that means nothing good can come out of it.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite ideas in my faith is this idea of divine providence and how basically the Lord is guiding everything to the best possible outcome. And what that means is that he isn't allowing or creating bad things, but when bad things happen, he is looking to create opportunities for people to bring the most good out of it. And I think just with the nature of human freedom, and we've talked about freedom on this podcast before and how freedom is essential for being a human. And with the nature of that, if God stopped all bad things from happening, freedom wouldn't be possible. And so it's not like God likes that this crisis is happening, but I think it's important as a religious or spiritual person to look for the areas in this that can help us grow, help us learn, and coming out of this, what can we take that makes the world better?
At the same time, I do think we need to be realistic, and I don't think it would be a good way to connect with people if we're just kind of prancing around being like, oh, well, there's so much good that can come out of this. I don't, because a lot of people are really hurting or really struggling or really scared. And I don't think meeting people with that sort of, that level of optimism, it's hard for me to say because I'm a very optimistic person, but going around saying like, oh, it could be worse. I don't think is disingenuous, but not always the most helpful. So I think on a personal level, we should be looking to, okay, this really sucks, but what can we do with this situation that is good? How can I further what I want to do or be a better person through this? But I think more globally, I don't know. What do you think the right level of that is?
Yeah, talking about a specific level is tough. I think it's clear to me that both need to be present, that if you ignore the problems, you're not going to learn anything. But if you ignore any possible learning and change for the better that can come out of it, obviously you're not going to learn anything. Mm-hmm. And so addressing the problem and also recognizing, like, from my point of view, like, where is God trying to help bring something good out of this?
So what do you think is the best situation that can come out of this? And on the flip side, what do you think is the worst situation that can come out of this spiritually?
Well, I don't know about best and worst, but
I'm just trying to take it to an extreme.
Yeah. One that I'm really excited about is I think that it's easy, and let me make this an I statement. I think that it's easy for me to not connect with health crises around the world. We hear about all these health crises in the past, like when Ebola was a big thing. I honestly didn't pay much attention because it didn't affect my life.
Swine flu.
I was like, I guess it's a thing, but like my life continued as normal, and I knew that I lived in a place where I was blessed to have appropriate medical care that could address the problem if it came up for me personally. And so I just was like emotionally disconnected from the struggle that other people were having.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
And I think the fact that this is so global hopefully will be a wake-up call that, like, actually, not on such a global scale, but health crises like this are happening all over the world all the time. And hopefully the people that have the economic stability and infrastructure to address those problems for the people without that infrastructure will actually feel more connected, because now maybe they understand at least just a little bit the widespread effect that an epidemic or pandemic can have on people.
Right.
And hopefully that'll make the world a little more
empathetic
and conscious of what people outside of our realm of living are dealing with.
Yeah, I also think it breaks down more globalist boundaries of, when the world is united under a common enemy, nations don't matter as much as fighting back against something. And, I used to think of aliens coming and invading, and then is it really going to matter what the dispute is between the U.S. and Russia is right now? No, that's important, but it's not going to matter as much as this common enemy. Right now, this pandemic is sort of a common enemy. And at the same time, there are still bad things happening around the world.
Hey, bless you.
Oh. Thank you.
It's the virus. I think you're going to need a disinfecting wipe.
Sneezing is not a
Sneezing is exactly
symptom. Don't, I have one over there. I have a wipe over there.
I'm going to whip one at you.
Don't whip a wipe at me.
Whip a wipe at me. Oh, that was really disappointing.
I don't want your used wipe.
No, I folded that one for optimal throwing.
No, it's on the
Oh,
ground.
now they're on the ground.
Yeah, it's all right. Ground's cleaner a little bit.
Hold on, let me get back to my train of thought.
Common enemy.
Yeah, I just forgot where I was going with that. And I think that has its sort of ramifications in politics as well. Like I was just talking to my stepbrother today on Facebook, and I've seen a bunch of people, well, to backtrack, right now the White House and Trump is going through a process of trying to get straight up cash to American citizens, kind of like a temporary UBI, hashtag Yang Gang, for citizens to help bolster the economy as it's just tanking and to help people who can't afford rent or that kind of thing. So this is an extremely like liberal, like deeply socialist idea that Trump is thinking about seriously implementing. And a lot of Republicans are as well. And some Democrats are opposed to it. So it's this weird political situation where you have people on both sides saying, oh, well, if you hate Trump, you shouldn't take these checks. And other people saying, oh, well, if you support Trump, you shouldn't want socialism. And I was talking about this with my stepbrother, and I think both people are missing the point. It's like, okay, these little political squabbles are not what's important right now. What's important right now is literally saving people and enabling people to survive and live throughout this time where something massive is taking over our daily lives. Like, these are small potatoes compared to this big thing. And sometimes, even in our lives, we need big shifts to put small things into perspective. So I think that's a big good thing that can come out of this, is putting things more in perspective of what's really important to us, and how we can move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not super up to date on the political side of this right now in the U.S., but it seems to me, just from the little bit I've seen, that this is like a much more nonpartisan issue than a lot have been recently in a very, very politically polar country for a long time now.
Yeah.
This is one where people are like, oh, wait, maybe a lot of people are kind of putting that aside. And it's not just going down party lines like so many things have for so long. And that's just like a pretty cool sign, like you were saying, of these barriers that we have put up between like us versus them mentalities are falling away, where it's like, actually, it's all us like trying to work together to get through this.
And like, I'm in a couple of Facebook groups for like my immediate community. Like the street that I live on formed a big Facebook group. And so if someone's running out to the grocery store to grab something, they're like, hey, does anyone need anything? Or if someone's struggling, they can post something if they can't get access to something or need disinfectant or something. And it's a sort of little commune sort of structure, but it's people showing that they care and want to help out their fellow citizens when something big is affecting everyone. You know, I've heard a lot of people comparing this to World War II and the deaths and toll that it can take. And I think there are many, many differences there. But I think that uniting under a common enemy and people feeling really passionate and like their action can really contribute to something greater is really important. Like people feeling like they can do something to help a neighbor, or by not doing anything, by staying home and washing your hands, you are also contributing to the health and safety of the larger America and larger world, which is really great.
And I think that from my perspective, those are the places where hopefully God is sowing the seeds of a greater sense of global empathy and trying to break down this us
sucks,
versus
though?
them.
That we need this for that kind of empathy.
Yeah.
That like I wasn't as affected by the swine flu, so I didn't really care about it as much as when this is affecting me and my family and my grandparents who might die because of this. Like, it stinks that I needed that sort of kick in the butt to feel empathetic for a face that I couldn't see.
Yeah, I think that...
And do we need that? Like, do we need this sort of thing to happen in order to be better people and feel this way? Ideally, I don't think so, but that's the reality we're facing.
Yeah, I think that like it wasn't essential for this change, but I think that maybe this change would not have happened without it, because I'm kind of it's interesting. I think I'm a very optimistic person and generally think that people are doing the best with what they've got individually, but I think globally, like collectively, humanity is extremely self-centered. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just kind of like our innate, that's our foundation. That's where we come from.
What's more self-centered than a baby? Honestly.
Yeah.
Just trying to survive.
And I don't think that self-centered has to be a bad thing, but it is a foundation that we should be moving past. And I think that's the whole goal of regeneration.
You can still make the argument that everything we do is self-centered, because even when we're being good people, it's because we feel good as a side effect of being a good person.
Yeah, and I've heard people kind of say that, and I think that there's a difference between everything being self-centered as its core motivation and there being some sort of self-centered satisfaction in everything we do. Mm-hmm. I think that's an important distinction, because I think there is a self-satisfaction in any good thing that we do because we're like, oh, I'm a good person. But I think that's not, turns out I'm actually still selfish. It's actually a blessing that we get to receive this personal motivator for continuing to do good things, you know?
Richard keeps turning away from the mic.
Yeah, Richard really likes to like look at me like I'm part of the conversation. And I
Yeah.
always really want to be part of the conversation. So here I am speaking now. A thing that I wanted to mention, since you had been talking about some of the political aspect of it and how it's so joining with everyone, which I feel like I have seen. I think also I've seen a very troubling undercurrent of misinformation that feels very insidious to some degree about the virus. I don't know how much you guys have encountered that. I think
it started
from
like
my
that.
personal experience. It seems to come from some unfortunately overly far right groups were initially trying to deny the seriousness of the virus so that they could match some of the statements that Trump had made and kind of stay on his team to some degree, and then have kept that mindset even since
I don't
Trump
think
has
I don't think a
changed
lot
his
of people have
tune.
kept that mindset. I think
I hope
some people
not.
always will because they're always going to be extremists. But I also think that kind of reflects what we go through spiritually sometimes. Like with an issue that we face personally, it's really easy at first when it's a small thing to deny. Be like, no, this isn't happening. No, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem at all. And then it's, oh, wait a second. No, I have a big old problem with this, and it's too late to easily combat it. Like, I can start making steps, but it's a big thing now. So I don't know. That just popped in my head. I thought that was kind of true for me at least. Like, there
I
are
guess
definitely things
you're
I
right
hide
that
until
I
it's
have
too
seen
late.
seen it lessen so much, even in like the last probably 5 days.
Well, I mean,
saw
look
a
at all
handful
of Trump's
posts.
tweets about it. Like, he started by denying it, saying it wasn't a problem. We had it under control. Fast forward to today, talking about giving America's more than $1,000.
Yeah. Which also very interesting that whole movement started with Mitt Romney.
Yeah, he
who's
introduced
a
it.
Republican, obviously, and he suggested just a one-time cash infusion of $1,000 to every I don't know if it was household or family. There's some debate about the specifics of it. And then Bernie basically was like, "Nah, screw that, $2,000 a month."
Yeah, he
And
was
then
like 2
everyone
trillion
kind of was like, "All
stimulus.
right." What's up? Can we up this plan even more? And so many people snowballed on it. So
Yeah.
it felt like it was a very much like a cross party lines group project.
Well, how I see it is kind of a tourniquet on a wound. Like, it's not going to be a long-term solution, but while we're struggling to figure out how to deal with this, develop a vaccine, and go forward, we need to kind of stem the blood flow a little bit.
I think this is a great transition into something I was hoping to talk about, which is the idea of spiritual community, which we talked about a little bit on our things about when we were talking about internet stuff like that way back. But I think the idea of community is so important, and it's fascinating that I've seen in this kind of more isolated setting now how much people are recognizing community. Like, I have spent more time hanging out with my friends, playing video games online with them than I have most evenings, where I would like come back from class and sit on my couch and binge a show by myself. And now I'm like, no.
Well,
Like, I can't go out, so I need to talk to people.
Well,
You should
I
get on
wa-
our Minecraft server, you dink.
And I've seen a lot of stuff out right now about like church refuses to close its doors
Really?
during coronavirus. Bunch of people get sick, and a lot of this like
that's not good.
kind of like, oh, look at churches being so stupid and not handling this problem well. And I don't want to say that it is a good idea to hold large services of hundreds of people, which there's like a whole big news story about that happening right now, and them pushing back against closing, and it's a whole thing. But I will say that if you look broadly, this is a very extreme minority that are still holding services and not addressing this appropriately. And our church is
Shut down.
not holding services, holding online services. And
Yeah,
we
quick
actually
plug for the Grand Human Project right now. If you guys want to search that, it's a way to join spiritual groups online that are meeting. So if you're desperate or really searching out for some community that has some spiritual benefit, so hit up the Grand Human Project.
And our church globally was going to have this big, basically church convention gathering thing this summer that we'd put, hundreds and hundreds of man hours into and sunk a bunch of money into it, and people had bought their plane tickets, and it was going to be this really cool church event, and now it's postponed with no specific date.
Yeah, I'm supposed to work like 3 different summer camps. Who knows if those are going to happen?
Yeah. And so I think just saying that, I think for the most part, churches across the world are handling this appropriately. And trying to find a way to have spiritual community online. And in one of my classes just the other day, we were talking about what the new church faith says specifically about spiritual community. And there's some pretty strong passages about how like a person's spiritual growth happens in community. Like these very, very definite concepts, or like basically spiritual growth doesn't happen in isolation. Like people grow by seeing others succeed and being inspired by it and growing as a collective. And there's this whole idea in our church of heaven being in the form of a human, meaning like there's a connection, a symbolism between the different things people do and the different uses of the human body. And so a single person is like a heaven, and a church community is like heaven, and all of heaven is like heaven and like a person, and this cool kind of microcosm, macrocosm idea. And so it's so useful to see a church community working together, like we were saying earlier, society working together as a symbol for how we deal with our own spiritual growth. And in this current situation, seeing how churches respond and how spiritual communities respond, I think is just as important. And it's just as important to try to stay connected with whatever spiritual community, whether an official organized sect of religion or just a group of people that help you spiritually. Staying connected with that, I think, is so important right now. Because I know for myself, when I isolate by myself and there aren't any other people that are holding me accountable, I'm just a crappier human being. Like, it's just easy to be nothing on my own. And with people around me, there's this sense of accountability for the kind of person I want to be, and also the sense of inspiration from like, oh man, Luke is taking spiritual ideas that we agree on and really using them to love other people in a way that inspires me to do the same. And so still seeking out those ways to feel accountable for your actions with others, and to still seek inspiration from what others are doing, I think is so important right now.
Well, I kind of almost want to push back on that a little bit. How much do you see regeneration being necessary to come from community? Because I see it as beneficial, but I don't see it as necessary. I think any change that you want to go through, you can do of your own accord.
But imagine you lived on a desert island and you spent your life from age 8 to 80 never seeing another individual. How many situations for spiritual growth would you have? You know,
that's a good point.
Who would you think, oh man, maybe I shouldn't.
How do you be a good person in complete isolation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I think it's obviously not binary. It's a sliding scale. And the more you're involved with others, the more you see ways that you can treat other people better. So I think to a certain degree, community is essential.
So maybe like you're on an island from 8 to 80 or whatever, 1 to 80. I think you can still, like even when you interact with animals or plants, not to get too hippie, but like you have a sense of wanting to treat other living things well, whether they're a person or not. So I was just trying to extend that. Like, I think morality and spirituality isn't just in groups, but it is in a person, because, if I was on an island, I would, need to hunt to eat, but I would not want to kill a turtle for fun, even though I didn't have anything to compare that to. Maybe it's hard to say that because I'm obviously coming from a socialized life, but I still think we could figure out little ways to be better people in isolation based on how we interact with the little environment that we do have.
Well,
And I think humans personify lots of stuff. So like,
yeah, and so I think that would still be you basically creating a fictitious spiritual community by personifying the things around you.
yeah, that's wild.
But I think that this idea of community, especially when it's actually in reality with actual other people, is such a core focus of how people grow spiritually. And so I see a lot of churches posting things online about, here's something to think about in this crisis. Here's a way you can help the people around you. Here's a way you can reflect. And I think it's so important to stay in touch with that and not let the lack of physical presence stop you from having an important spiritual community.
Amen. I'd give you a high five, but I'm not allowed.
So yeah, I just thought that was an important kind of message to have. And I'm blessed that I'm currently in a theological school. So having a sort of spiritual community is kind of inevitable for me as I meet consistently to talk with people about spiritual ideas. And innately that primes in me reflection about my own spiritual life. And so I think if I was not in class, if it was over the summer right now, I'd probably just be like mindlessly playing video games all day and not really doing a lot of positive spiritual work. So maybe I'm projecting onto a broader audience a need here, but I think for myself, I need that sense of spiritual community to grow, and wouldn't necessarily take the time to seek it out in the same way.
I also feel like religious vernacular has become more a part of my language in the last couple of weeks. And I'm not super sure why. And it's something I just feel like helps me as a person. I've said the phrase, I'm blessed, or I feel blessed a number of times in this past week, just reflecting on my situation and how it compares to people who are in much worse states than me, sadly. But I feel like just implementing that dialogue helps me feel more connected and think about God more in my day-to-day life. Just inserting little things. And I used to feel pretty opposed or allergic to Christian dialect, like talking about Jesus or talking about God or having that. But I see some benefits there for myself just to think about it more and have it be a bigger part of my life, just inserting it into more conversational ways.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on my own kind of weird drawback. And I think for me, a lot of it comes from like, oh, well, I don't know like if they're in the same boat or not.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what their beliefs are. I don't want to push my beliefs on them.
But I think you can do it in different ways. Like, I think there's a difference in saying like, oh, I feel very blessed, and like clearly trying to see if they're going to repeat or like buy into that conversation versus just like, dude, I'm feeling blessed. Like I'm like clearly happy and doing your own thing and not needing them to respond in a certain way. But I think there can be so much pressure in Christian conversations. Woof.
Yeah, but also I've been digging, just getting more comfortable with being like, hey, God bless.
Yeah.
Because like I do want God to bless another person. Like I do want a person to feel the blessings of God, whether that is an active belief in God or not. I want them to feel blessed, like they have a lot of good things in their life. And they can be like, I don't believe in God, but I don't think it has to be with, like if someone of a different faith said, God bless you, or Allah bless you, or whatever your idea of God is, I'd be like, tight, thanks.
Yeah. I think for some people who have religious baggage, it could be a bad thing, but you can't know everyone's baggage getting into conversations.
And I think that idea of not making it a pressurized thing, just like, hey, boom, throwing it out there, I want you to be happy. And from my worldview, that comes from God. So be happy.
And I think we all benefit when people are presenting their worldviews and their cultures. And I think we gain more than that than trying to hide it and adapt to different things in a sort of dishonest way.
Yeah, I agree. For sure.
Ben, do you have any thoughts? I'm going to open up to you back there. How are you feeling?
Thoughts? Yeah, I don't know. I definitely do have thoughts. Hold on. I wasn't expecting to be called on, though.
Hey.
I would definitely identify with a lot of discomfort around those kind of religious conversations. Even if, like, the people closest to me that I know, like, are sort of on board with at least a similar wavelength of thought. It's very tough because not only like I've never really jived with the concept of blessing to begin with. I definitely identify more with like God is cool because he created a structure in which we live and not one that changes under the circumstances that are assumed when you say the word blessing.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea that God like picks somebody out and is like, yo, you're gonna have a good day today, because that feels like it breaks the system.
Yeah,
I
like
don't-
who is he choosing not to have a good day?
Yeah. Or like, why is everyone else having a mediocre day? Or
Wait, can I
just a
quick
fine
interject?
day? Yeah.
I feel like I have this visual of this. It's like a cool uncle who has his own little relationship with every one of his nieces and nephews, and he's like a little side wink, a little present to everyone, and they all feel like the most special one, but they're all equally special. I don't know. Maybe that's weird, but I don't know. That's sort of a system I operate under.
I guess I feel like the faith I grew up under like likes to use the word blessing, but also kind of acknowledges what I'm talking about. But I've never like quite understood how those ideas resolve together.
Well, I
'Cause,
think
like, well, no, not everybody's being like singled out, but also like you can be blessed. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And I've never quite understood how those things meet up. So it's just like language I don't use. And then also, I've definitely, I mean, the much bigger conversation is just the general move away from religious thought, like, or conversation, religious wording in like popular conversation. I feel like, especially like with a larger audience through the internet, you run into so many people who have had negative negative experiences with
Right.
religion, or just generally don't want to imply more than they mean by saying anything to do with religion, because there's so much bad press for poorly run religious institution, and because the people who don't identify as religious therefore are more likely to kind of lump a lot of churches in together. They hear somebody say God bless, or like, hey, God bless you, you're doing good.
Well, that hits on
Praise-
some of what
praise
Richard was
Jesus.
saying
Yeah.
earlier of like the bad stuff churches are doing is sticking out more than the good, or like people lumping all churches as the same.
Which is a problem in every area,
Yeah.
and it's a thing that it's also tough to push back against, because I don't want to ever like imply that like there aren't churches that are doing a lot of bad stuff. Like if anything, like I feel like I myself tend to fall more on like in the news that I consume, I'm seeing like anti-religious content, and I more often like vibe with the like secular side of it, because the churches that are being shown are ones that do not at all align with my beliefs of what a church should be doing. Like, it's very easy for any reasonable person to be against the Westboro Baptist Church, and like luckily they've
Right.
kind of faded out in the last few years, which is nice. Or any number of other weird things. Like, it's easy to be like, hey, maybe let's not all get together for the coronavirus. Like, let's not have a giant church service where we infect everybody. And we can all get on board with like, those people and their faith are being really dumb. And that's not really how God works. He doesn't want you to test your faith by getting a disease.
Oof. Oof.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at this whole churches still gathering thing from a little bit of a political lens, because like constitutionally, you can't really stop church gatherings. You can't stop gatherings of worship, because that is infringing on freedom of religion.
Yeah.
And so this big one, I think it was,
And it's very weird, because I very much I believe in that right very strongly, that people should have that autonomy in their belief. And so I don't know if I think we could legally stop people from being like, let's get together and challenge the disease, or it like gets you into some very fraught philosophical conversation at the very least.
yeah, where it's like how much how much of a personal health problem or global health problem does it need to be before we start infringing on people's intrinsic rights?
Yeah.
Is a really weird conversation, because like, I don't know, if our country was invaded by aliens and for whatever reason, they were targeting groups of people that gathered in 100 or more consistently every time, we'd probably be like, don't do it. You're all going to die. But there's enough of like this weird pushback against like the government telling me and my church what to do.
Yeah.
It's like they shouldn't have
When
to
do you
be.
push back against for the greater good?
And that's the
Yeah.
most interesting part of all of it for me is that like I consume a lot of like either philosophical content that deals with like macro philosophical issues or like specifically political philosophy, and none of that functions under the framework of assuming a pandemic. It like assumes that people have a normal amount of mobility. There is a well-established sort of way that resources flow or don't flow.
Yeah.
And so all political philosophy is done under like an understanding of the way the world works.
Right.
And
So I think
there's
it's hard to
not a lot
apply
of it.
those types of structures to a situation that has a completely different foundation.
Yeah.
Like the foundations of most political philosophy rely upon intrinsic rights or basic philosophies. But when you take away the foundations of what that needs to be based on as far as safety, reliability, structure, you can't apply it in the same way maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, if we look at kind of global crises, and you mentioned World War II, I think so often it's not a problem because everyone kind of recognizes a shared global need and nothing has to be enforced. And people kind of have this like, okay, well, we're going to put down what we're doing and we're going to help. Like I wasn't alive during World War II, but from what I have learned in history classes and my own looking into it, there was a sense of like, a lot of people are overseas right now. Like, where can all of us pick up the slack? And like this kind of like, we're going to support in whatever way we can.
Yeah.
Everyone chose to ration and no one, like there was little opposition to it because they were like, we need this. Our country needs this to support the people that are self-sacrificing for a greater good. And I think for the most part, we see that now. There are very few places where you see political or police activity for large gatherings. This one big news thing with a church that usually has like 2,000 people a service gathering, and like 600 people came, and the police came and were like, nah, don't. Like the National Guard's going to get involved if you do this again. And the National Guard was like, no, we're not. That's straight up unconstitutional. It's not the way we're doing this at all. And so it's this whole big thing about like, how dare they infringe on our rights? But then on the other side, like, how dare they endanger so many people?
Right.
And yeah, like how bad a situation does it need to be? And I tend to think like the worse the situation gets, the less actual enforcement is going to be needed, because the more people just are like,
It's common sense sort of.
we just need to all do this,
Yeah.
and it's not about whether we should or not, because we all see that this is what it is,
Right.
with a few outliers. And I feel like that's what's happening right now in the realm of church organizations, is almost all churches are like, yeah, we see the need, like we're moving to online services, we're trying to inspire people to help the community in whatever way they can, and there are a few outliers that, in my opinion, are making real dumb choices.
Yeah.
Also, on a totally side note, we're coming up on a very religious holiday focused part of the year. I mean, Christianity has Easter. There's Passover and Ramadan coming up. So, and I'm not as familiar with other faiths, and that's on me, I guess. But I'm sure there are a lot of religious holidays happening during these times that are just canceled. And a couple of episodes ago, we had real big talk about a baller Easter celebration
I'm
that we were
still
going to
down
throw
for
together.
Baller Easter. We can do it over video chat or something.
Yeah, but it's definitely going to change the framework of that. We were
Yeah.
planning for like a big Sunday.
It's going to be all like community focused. Too,
Yeah.
Like in-person community.
Yeah, and like the whole framework of that, the whole landscape of that is now just, that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like every major holidays traditions are based around groupings of people, or like it's usually focused on our meal. And like, are you making a giant special meal for you alone in your home?
Right.
Is that going to really create the holiday spirit for you?
Yeah, and from like an economic standpoint, holiday times are also big charitable times for churches, both in the charity they do for others and also people who care about their church feeling inspired to give and support and keep their church running, and looking at like if the Easter celebration is happening online, Easter is a big time that a lot of Christian churches go from red to black and stay afloat from generous
I
giving.
didn't know that.
And so a lot of churches are like, I don't know if we're going to be able to inspire people to give in the same way online.
I don't think that's a solely church issue. Like how are colleges going to stay afloat? How are private schools going to stay afloat? There are so many business, like how are restaurants? A small employer that owns a business that employs 20 people who are laid off right now or going unpaid. How are they going to pay for the rent of their facility that they use? Like there are all these questions. So it's affecting churches and everyone.
I feel like the scariest thing is airlines. They apparently like no major airline has the money to stay afloat under these circumstances. Yeah. Like in a matter of weeks, they will all have been under. And like it's just a very weird thing to know that like a service like that and the money in the mix around it is so intangible as for it to like disappear. And we're going to have plenty of jets that are fine and functional, but like not the service to like keep them in the sky.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Yeah. I was talking to my brother who just had a baby, my brother and sister-in-law. And they live in the Bronx, and like everywhere in there is just like really little, like one person small businesses. And all of them are basically like, next week we're done. Dang. Like if this goes to next week, we're going to have to close. We're going to have to file for bankruptcy. Wow. And like on Broadway, there are a ton of theaters that are like, we're closing our doors and we're filing for bankruptcy. This theater no longer exists.
Yeah.
And it's just wild to see the amount of economic focus
and at the same time, like
economic destruction.
Yeah. And we don't know where this is going to go. Like no one knows how long this is going to take. You know, commonly vaccines take anywhere to up to 18 months or at the shortest sometimes to be developed. Like this could be our reality for a long time, and it's going to change. It's changed every day in the past week from what I've seen. So even by the time this podcast comes out in a couple days from when we record, things might be different. So I just want to, I guess, kind of urge people to stay on your toes, be flexible, take things seriously, but hold them lightly, and get ready for a different kind of world. And it sounds kind of crazy or extreme, but you gotta be prepared for this. So I don't know. It's a scary time, and I want to acknowledge that. I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Get ready for Baller Easter, though. Don't forget.
Yeah, Baller Online Easter.
But I also want to say, social distancing, very important, but social distancing doesn't mean spiritual distancing. Don't
preach.
Have yourself shut in and not reach out to people when you need it. People are going to find ways to talk to you, to chat with you, to be there for you. And it's important to have semblances of community. Like we talked about this whole podcast, the importance of community, whether that's an individual relationship with your best friend or in a social group or in your church or in even your business. I know like my girlfriend has been texting her coworkers because she's close to them. So don't distance yourself spiritually from people because that's so important. And I'm worried about people's depression rates, anxiety rates, suicide rates, and how this is all going to affect that. So stay close to people. I think that is so important, more important than a lot of other things. So reach out, be reached out to, talk to people, and maintain the semblance of community, because I think that's going to be so important going forward.
I'm going to do a quick segment here. I'm not doing my intro music because it doesn't feel appropriate, but this is another Hometown Hero segment.
I want to hear the intro music.
I'm not going to do the intro music.
Here, I'll do a little intro music. Hometown Heroes.
Thanks.
I wasn't even sure to do segments because none of mine felt like, yeah.
Well, this is a very appropriate one. I want to just give a big shout out to Dr. Lee. Are you familiar with this whole situation? I don't know how to pronounce his last name because I'm a terrible American that does no cultural literacy. #Americans.
With that caveat, I feel like you'd give it a stab in the dark.
Wen Lang, maybe? Chinese doctor that was one of the first people to notice COVID-19 and sent out a message to basically all the people in his graduating medical school class to be careful. And then that went online and was kind of the first bell ringing of
Dang.
warning signs. He was afterward arrested.
Dang.
and
I think I heard about that.
like detained for a bit for making false comments on the internet. Later, he was cleared of the charges, obviously,
good.
when it started to become a big thing. But unfortunately, he got the virus from an infected patient and died at age 33.
Oh my gosh.
Just a little bit ago. But I just want to take the time to say, and he knew like the moment his comments went onto the internet and went viral that
He
there
knew
was
the ramifications.
that there was going to be pushback from the police force against him. Like he knew he was going to see bad things happen to him for that.
Wow.
And just I want to honor the bravery for noticing a problem and trying to get ahead of it, even at the stake of personal loss. I think it's just a really powerful role model for people that are trying to do the right thing and are worried about the way it'll affect people and the way that them taking action might affect them. Just a very... And it wasn't... The thing that's most inspiring about it to me is it wasn't like a big, like, I'm going to be a hero moment. He was just like, I see a problem. I'm going to let people know that I think can do something about it. And it was very... To him, it seemed like it... From what I've read from his statements, it seems like it was very much like it wasn't a big decision. It was just, hey, this is a problem. People should know about it. That's it doesn't have to be complicated. Mm-hmm. And so not like a big, I'm going to be a hero moment. He didn't even mean for his name to get out there in any way. Right. That wasn't the intention at all. It was just, I see a problem. I'm going to take the action that I think is appropriate.
Yeah, that's
and
heroic.
It doesn't need to be more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Do
the right thing because it's the right thing.
And that's just really cool. And it's, I know that a lot of people in China, from what I've read, are pretty outraged about everything that happened around him. The fact that
he was arrested and silenced, sort of.
Yeah, and even currently, people's like information about him that people in China are putting out is being removed. Even in the realm of China also releasing statements saying, like, we want as much information to be out as possible about this. People need to be informed. I know that there are people in China that feel like the Chinese government only does that as far as it doesn't reflect badly on them.
Right.
And I'm not as informed to know the validity of that, but I know that a lot of people in China are feeling stifled in their ability to speak about the problems that are happening really intensely in their country right now, and feel like the Chinese government will say it when it looks nice for them for it to be said. And again, I'm not informed enough to know the validity, but I just want to express the people feeling that, whether it's a real thing or not. I can't imagine how hard it would be to feel like you are in such a hotbed of a huge global crisis and also feel like your information is restricted. Must be a really tough place to be right now.
Yeah, this actually, a news story I read, it's on its face feels very Zoomery, but is really, really cool. I forget if it was who originated the project, but the idea is that a Minecraft realm was created. So it's a shared server that anyone can go on online if they have the address in Minecraft. And
Ben's obsessed with Minecraft.
Well, right now I am playing Minecraft, and that was how I found out about it. But this is separate from Minecraft, very cool to anybody. Let me get to the end. Is that a massive library was created in game? It looks gorgeous, like just to look at from the outside. Very well constructed, if that matters. But inside, you now in Minecraft can create books that have written text in them. So in game, you can just open a book and read it. It's not like the most accessible way to read a full book, but it's there if you want it. And so this library has just been filled with information to get censored articles and documents to people in China that could not access them any other way.
Wow.
Because it is a loophole to some degree that like you can't stop someone just accessing Minecraft, but you can get them censored political information through the game,
crazy.
which is I don't know, like
Didn't people also
people find it
I
innovative.
feel like Minecraft has been doing a bunch of didn't they also create a computer in Minecraft that works?
I mean, there's plenty of people who've done like absolutely obscene stuff,
Right.
Like the complexity of
Again,
people
it's
working in
just a
Minecraft.
brave new world.
Is nuts, but yeah, this is the first time I've ever seen it for like almost like political activism.
Well, I remember
very
a couple
cool.
of years ago it was used. Computers with Minecraft were given to like communities in like really impoverished areas, and they were like, "Hey, build what a community looks like build how you want your town set up, and then send this world to us, and we will construct it." And it's basically like using Minecraft in really impoverished areas, I think mostly in Africa, to basically allow them to be architects of their own communities and villages. And towns, which is just like super cool how like just like a goofy little survival building game, people are like, oh, actually,
We can use
this
this for good.
has some amazing implications.
Right.
So yeah, another blessing of the modern era that there are tools, no matter how like kind of weird and strange it sounds, that are doing a lot of good in a very like physically isolating time.
Next episode, Fortnite solves Israel v. Palestine.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, they all find a common enemy in 12-year-old boys that are terrible on the
Create a
internet.
Fortnite coalition against like the best players in America, and
A whole new meaning to multiplayer. All right.
Yikes, that was probably offensive.
No, I don't think that's gonna stay in. So, thank you guys for tuning in. I feel like we're kind of winding down here.
Yeah.
But I think some big takeaways from this episode are to stay connected to people, stay in some sort of spiritual community in whatever way that works for you. Be active on like group chats or Discord or video chat, whatever works for you. Stay connected to people. What other big takeaways do we have, Richard?
Yeah, staying connected is a huge one. The importance of spiritual community is huge, and finding the ways that the world and you personally can grow positively out of a real tragic situation.
Yeah.
I mean, some people say finding the silver lining, but finding the ways that God is bringing good out of this and allowing that good to be realized by your own actions and mindset.
And we're not going so far as to say that, ignore all the bad things that are happening and just concentrate on and pretend that everything's good, because it's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, find the good stuff within the dark. Find the light in the dark. Look for that at least. And be there for people who need it.
Yeah.
And know that God didn't make this happen to people for a specific reason. You're not being tested in your faith. At least we don't believe you're being tested in your faith. And that this is just part of how the world works sometimes.
Yeah.
Because we need our freedom.
The nature of freedom is that bad things have to happen.
Yeah. But find the good and the bad. And we'll see what happens in a week from now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, thanks so much for tuning in. You can catch us anywhere you find a podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. You can watch us on... That was a real inside joke you just laid down. You can find us on YouTube. Feel free to, especially now more than ever, send us emails about content you want to see, or if you just need support, because we'd like to be a spiritual community for people that need it. So feel free to send us an email at spiritablepodcast@gmail.com.
Let us know in the comments.
Big one. The studio will be rigged up next Wednesday for internet calling. So if you want to have a little moment, chat with us on the show or something, I could potentially hook you up with that situation. So send us an email there, and maybe I'll have some people who are interested call in briefly.
It'd be sweet. Comment below whose PJs you liked better. Mine are Richard's.
Yeah, well, but actually, This one's mine and that one's my wife's, so I win
true.
both, kind of. But just aesthetically, it'd be good to know which are better PJs. Things to know. This actually
Anyway,
has the feet. It also has a butt
smash
flap,
subscribe,
Butt flap is big.
but that one has
smash
a hood.
like,
Very
smash
important.
subscribe. Tune in next time. But in all seriousness, stay safe, stay clean, and be good to yourselves and others. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
And don't forget that the members of the reality show Big Brother entered the house on February 5th and have had no contact with the outside world. So they are in for a wild ride.
Wow.
What a way to end.
That is wild, though. They're going to be so confused.